I became disillusioned as to the world. PR is a weapon. Bigger competitors would get wind of a smaller competitor that had better technology to create public opinion firestorms, to throw the smaller competitors under the bus. That's when I learned it's not the Wild West where you could shoot them out, you could print them out.
You're listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience, a podcast dedicated to helping executives train their sales and marketing teams to optimize growth. Whether you're looking for techniques and strategies or tools and resources, you've come to the right place. Let's accelerate your growth in 3, 2, 1.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. I'm your host, Cory, and today we have with us Karla Jo Helms. She's an influential thought leader in the public relations industry, known for innovative and disruptive approach to PR. Now, Karla Jo is currently serving as the founder and CEO of JOTO PR Disruptors, an agency recognized globally for its anti-PR strategies, which combines crisis management skills with advanced media algorithms. Karla Jo and her team utilize newly established patterns to create timely PR campaigns comprising both traditional and the latest proven media methods. Karla Jo, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Cory. Glad to be here. Excited to be here, actually.
Yeah, me too. I'm excited to get into this. I know from a marketing perspective, many marketers and many revenue leaders look at PR in different ways, right? Some are all in on the value of it. Some are a little bit skeptical. So excited to learn more about your unique approach.
Great. I'm excited too. I will say that there is a prevailing sentiment that is changing from revenue leaders and marketers, especially with all this digital disruption and transformation that's happening. The viewpoint of it has become more of a necessity, and it's very interesting to see that tide change.
Yeah, I'm starting to see that as well. But first, I want to go back and kind of think about the traditional view of PR. Like you said, it's changing, but normally, let's go back 5 years. If you got a CFO in a room and you said, we're going to do a big PR initiative, the looks are like, okay, well, how are we going to measure this? We're going to investigate the bird signs. We're going to dig out a Ouija board. The links from hardcore PR to this is demand gen, this is a lead, were a bit murky in the past. So give us a high-level view of how your strategy differs from what some might call that old school approach.
Yeah, I love that question. I love talking to CFOs, revenue leaders on this. And I loved that you said hardcore PR, because that's what I'm all about, not fluffy 70-year-old tactics. I will tell you my background's in crisis management. So that's how I got started in the industry. That's less than 10% of the industry, right? That part of managing and guiding public opinion is based on 3 things: physics, math, and emotion, right? And so when you take a look at, I'm going to totally do a different aspect to look at the measurement from hardcore PR down to leads, right? But when you take a look at a company that's in trouble, right? And it's in the court of public opinion, there's been a lawsuit, there's been something, and it's, the news has gone wild, right? The very first thing that crisis PRs do is we look at the math of it. Let's look at the total addressable market or the sector of the market of their target audience that is really upset. How big is it? All right. Then we look at the sentiment. That's a barrier, right? Like, are they really, really upset? Are they, you look at their emotion, and there's different multiples for the emotions, right? So that's a multiple of how big that is. You're also looking at the barrier to entry. In other words, to get your message changed. How bad was the lawsuit, right? How much press is there, negative press is there against us, right? So there's various things you look at as another multiple. And then you look at how many times are you going to have to communicate your narrative to totally push out the other one and fill the vacuum on what you want people to know. That's a 20 to 50 times multiple. And you get this huge number. And this is really how PR was born, right? Like, how am I going to convince people that, how am I going to get this much exposure this many times over and over, right? And that's when you start to calculate, okay, where are my audiences going to for their information? Where's the watering holes? Where's the news? How many subscribers do they have? How many people at a time? And you start to calculate out the exact channels to get your message on. How many times? That volume, And it's a wash, rinse, repeat. Let me fill the vacuum mathematically. And just think of a little bar chart, right? Where you can actually see, like, every time something's published, okay, great. It went out here. There was 40 million in that circulation. There was, 30,000 in that particular publication. It was 10,000 in this one. And you start to raise the bar. And what you're doing is you're filling the vacuum and pushing out the other one, right? Not everybody's going to have read that article that time. So you have to do it over and over and over. How that relates down to leads is then that correlates to how many people are actually being exposed and seeing the message. So marketing comes in and pulls those warmed up prospects or those that have changed their minds. Now they're doing heavily their marketing tactics to those audiences, pulling them down the funnel. And then that is where you have sales that takes those leads that have come in, changed minds, they're already educated, they're pulling them down to conversions, and you can really start measuring exposure to marketing ROI, to customer acquisition cost, to sales velocity, and to revenues. And we've been able to do that time and time again in Crisis, and we just moved that over to the proactive side.
I love it. Yeah, that's definitely a thorough approach. And I think that would convince any revenue leader listening to rethink those maybe old school beliefs if they had them to begin with. It obviously, in walking us through that journey, you speak from a place of authority, of strategy, of experience. Was there one particular moment that really was an aha moment for you, really shaped this philosophy that you just walked us through?
It was early on in my career. I did not go into crisis management as like, oh, this is what I want to do in life. It just so happened I worked for a very large healthcare organization, and I was in their PR training program, and healthcare, finance, and technology industries get into trouble a lot. Well, they got into trouble. And I really learned from the best crisis PRs in the world and litigators and private investigators in the world. I can't tell you much about this particular case of what happened, but I learned, and I became disillusioned as to the world. PR is a weapon. And in every single case, that case shaped me, but what I learned there and every single case that I worked thereafter is that the bigger competitors would get wind of a smaller competitor that had better technology, faster technology, that was taking over market share, but they did not have a lot of goodwill publicity protecting their assets. And those bigger behemoths were able to create public opinion firestorms to throw the smaller competitors under the bus and get them so embroiled in handling that they would get off of their go-to-market game. And that's when I learned it's not the Wild West where you could shoot them out, you could print them out. And after about 3 to 5 years of seeing that over and over, I was convinced that smaller guys needed to know the playbook. Yeah. It's not cool. Like, that's not cool. And it goes on today, and it still goes on today. And I could predict probably so many things that happened of what happened behind the scene. But it is imperative that people understand this playbook so that they can control their own narrative.
Yeah, it's hard to hear, and at the same time, it's not necessarily surprising. If you want to talk about stirring things up, we got a long history of, we go all the way back to, Marat, right? 1790s, it's been happening for a while. People are writing whatever they want to write, and it's having a lot of consequences. So the little guys need to be prepared.
So true.
So shifting off of crisis comms for just a second here, and crisis comms I think is going to play a part in this, but if we're just talking like what's the most impactful opportunity for B2B companies who are, not necessarily under that attack or, haven't had the misfortune to get caught up in some bad press, where should they be directing their efforts first?
I love that question because today we don't work on crisis comms. We work on the proactive side. We've just flipped the script or the corollary and taken those same tactics and apply it proactively. Every now and then we'll take on a crisis, but that's just to keep us honed. The most impactful thing that B2B companies can do, like to capitalize on this, is know how big their market is. Just apply the mathematical formula that we use in crisis management to know how much exposure they really need to have to start getting their total addressable market, right? Understanding who they are so marketing can have a much easier time of selling to that 3 to 7% that they're only selling to at any given time. And the way you do that today is first you understand how big your market is and how much you need to be the thought leader and control the narrative to educate people what's going on. But start filling the vacuum on the biggest issues that you're solving. This is not traditional fluffy type tactics. We're the best company. We won this award. No, this is what is the major harm, the controversy, the long-term disagreements, the money wasted, the lost, fraud that your technology is solving. You know the pain points of your clients. You know what's keeping them up at night. You know what your prospects, problems that they have. Exploit that in your PR narratives and then insert your education and your good news about what to do about it. That is probably the best PR opportunity that B2B companies can do today because I think B2B rules the world. It's just what they do affects the end consumer, and they can talk about that all the day long. Like the news will print that.
Yeah, completely agree. And I've noticed a sort of through line in your comments so far when you were talking about, the total size of the addressable market. And then earlier on when you're talking about, okay, you have to do the math, like we have 35,000 people that are super, super angry, and we have, 1.2 million customer base, and we've got to get in front of these people 20, 30 times. So I'm starting to sense that there might be a certain game of ratios going on. So, I mean, if I know my addressable market, like what's the volume I want, or what's the publication size I want? Is there any sort of golden ratio there we should be looking for?
Yes, that's a very good question. And that is dependent upon your industry, your company's go-to-market, your growth goals, the target audience. It is dependent upon it. And you do have to do the work to figure out what those ratios are. You start with a projection and a very intelligent estimation based on several factors. And then, every month and over time, you adjust those numbers and take a look at it to get your formula.
That makes sense. It's going to vary and it's going to be dynamic. Okay. Got it. Going back to the most impactful ways that B2B companies can leverage PR, it felt like when you were speaking earlier, you were talking about, really getting out there, getting in front of the customer, building brand awareness, building brand authority and good faith so that marketing could capitalize on that. But you've also spoken about something called, sort of a brand resiliency. Could you tell us more about that and how PR plays a role?
Sure. Brand resiliency is, can the brand make the sale? Are you at that point? Have you built that momentum? Do you have that critical mass? And then momentary dips and halts or little skirmishes can't affect it or can quickly be turned around. So if you have a brand that is very, very well thought of, they have a lot of goodwill. I mean, PR, one of the definitions is good work's well publicized. If it isn't written, it isn't true in today's world. But they've got a good brand equity. They've got good brand name. You keep that resilience by continuing to put out the communication and the narrative and the brand story that you want, right? Things are going to happen. And that is what makes a brand resilient because they are taking charge of their narrative.
Yep, I like it. I think it's crucial for companies to take charge of who they want to be, kind of what they want to say, because if they're wavering on that, that doesn't present a confident look to the customer, right? If they don't know themselves, how can they expect the customer to know them in a way?
Yeah, there's actually a secret. We did market research on 5,000 CEOs of fast-growing tech companies, B2B, that used PR, and we found out how they used it to expand and what they did and why they did it, right? 86% of them said that they used it to stay visible, to keep visible, to keep known. It was a process that was ever going, right? And I found this to be really very interesting because They 1-for-1, I mean, out of 5,000, and that number said that verbiage exactly. I'm not kidding you. This is a particular type of market research. Staying visible and communicating their purpose, the vision of why they're doing what they're doing, was the most important thing to controlling the markets. And companies forget that. And these guys were visionaries, and they knew that that's what it took. Hardcore trial and error. They figured out this is what we have to communicate at the top of the funnel all the freaking time. Isn't that interesting?
That really is, because I think some companies think of purpose and mission as something that you just slap on the About Us page. It's pretty enough. You move on, right?
I say that all the time. It's the token page, right?
And so what do these companies do differently with purpose? Like, how are they communicating that in a way that really led to customer engagement?
Yeah, say you're a business and you handle chargebacks filings for companies that shoppers have filed like fraudulent chargebacks against their credit cards, right? They got the goods and then they told the credit card, we didn't get the goods, so you got to charge it back. And you have a company that mitigates this for small businesses and levels the playing field for small businesses to be able to have a voice to Visa and MasterCard. Like, hey, these are fraudulent charges, right? If their purpose is to level the playing field, every single PR, communication, story, interview, whatever, should be about any event, incident, technology issue that is leveling the playing field for small businesses that relates back in some form or fashion to what they're doing. It doesn't have to be tit for tat, right? It doesn't have to be exactly, but it is around a particular area or narrative. They're the hero. And whatever marketing they put out, those small businesses are like, yeah, they're for us. They're for leveling the playing field. So any regulation that comes along, if they're in support of it because it helps small businesses, they'll be in the news. If they're against it, they'll be in the news. That is the purpose of the company, to regulate the playing field. And that's what PR does.
That makes a lot of sense. And speaking of being in the news, right? Once a company achieves that, I think, level of clout, right? Like you said, if there's a news story out there or if there's some legislation pending and they're going to be able to, get their opinion in a certain news story, that's tremendous. What's the most effective way for a company to kind of reach that level? How can you pique the interest of the media when maybe you haven't, you don't have those relationships? Like if you're replying to queries and you're getting nowhere, what's kind of the playbook that we should take there?
It is a consistent approach. It comes with a strategy first. So there's that mathematical part, right, of figuring out the numbers. And then there is the approach of, the emotion and also filling the vacuum with the right narrative. That comes with a strategy and how to proactively communicate particular angles and narratives to the media, not waiting to, you're creating new news for them, right? You have the inside information. You're not waiting until something happens and then trying to get in on the news. This is an existing situation that's happening. We have additional data that we can give you on that would impact your readers by knowing this. And you do that consistently and you provide value to the media houses. You're not asking them to be your PR arm. You're saying, hey, Cory, you've got this audience and they're interested in this. And this is something that's happening, but I have inside information that could totally change how they're going to be looking at this. And I'm happy to give you my expertise and talk about this to help them. You're giving, right? You do this consistently enough and you will get published. And say you start with the trade publications and you go some podcasts, right? The mainstream media does follow what's going on in all the alternate media to figure out what's trending. You do this enough, you get the attention. Media begets media. It's probably the one thing that creates such a snowball momentum. If you keep up that consistent amount, come up with a cadence. It's part of the algorithm, right? Are we going to do it quarterly? Are we going to do it monthly? Are we going to do it bi-monthly? you really can build up critical mass that way.
That's excellent advice. Provide value. Don't let them be your PR arm, or don't ask them to be your PR arm, right? You've got to come with them like, hey, I've got more information. I've got more data. This is going to enrich the story. I'm a resource.
Yes.
That's crucial.
Yes.
Okay, let's go back really quickly. I know we got away from crisis comms, but I
Okay.
did want to touch on it again because I know you have a lot of expertise here. And it's one of those things that you don't need it and you don't think about until you do in a lot of companies, a lot of smaller companies in particular. What are the key principles of it? If, companies out there hit with something they didn't see coming, where should they go first?
They should not withdraw. They should communicate and speak up. Anytime, it goes back to physics. If you have an area that has nothing in it, the airflows or the vectors are going to try to fill that area in the physical universe. If you have some particular narrative or accusation or story out there that is not true, it's not going to go away, guys. It's filling the vacuum. You have to put enough pressure in that area to move that air or that narrative out and fill your vacuum. So the very first thing you do is you speak up and you start to communicate your side of the story. I mean, that's so basic. And Cory, I will say, don't do this without a crisis PR, because when people try to do this in the court of public opinion, they do it backwards and they get into trouble. There are exact rules of engagement that you do when you're doing crisis management and you are flipping the script in the court of public opinion that people naturally do wrong. And so they need guidance on this.
What are some of those mistakes that you see people making time and time again?
You never communicate whatever the negative line is about you. You don't repeat the enemy line. So if someone says, you didn't pay your taxes, you don't say, I do pay my taxes, right? Or you cheated on your wife. I did not cheat on my wife. What do people think about? Like instantly, you're just forwarding whoever's attacking you their line. You actually communicate it in such a way and show proof that you didn't. That's why you need someone to help you. So you don't pay your taxes. Well, here's a certificate from the IRS saying that I am a stellar taxpayer for the past 10 years. You have to be quick. You have to be smart. You have to be on the ball. But that's one of the things people do is they get really upset and they defend. You're a crook. I am not a crook. Everybody thinks you're a crook.
That makes a lot of sense. And I imagine it gets even more difficult, especially if you take that directly antagonist rhetoric on something like social media, because you'll just go blue in the face saying the same thing over and over again and get nowhere. So how does that play out on social? Are there specific tactics and strategies that work well there?
It's very similar. Social in these particular cases is used as an amplification. Social has the ability to take a media story and make it get seen by so many different audiences that would have never seen it before. And so you quickly have to do the same thing and amplify. And yeah, there's so many tactics on that for social media. You have to determine where you're going to start and what your resources are. Maybe you're going to do it on LinkedIn. Maybe you're going to do it on Reddit. Maybe you're going to answer only the positive to get the algorithm going up. So it really depends on the strategy. I hate to say. There's not a one size fits all or a bullet.
Well,
I will tell you this. If you have to negate or defend, never defend in crisis, always attack. And there's ways that you do that so that you're doing it well. But if you're constantly feeling like you're having to defend, or you start defending on every little thing, you look weak. You look small. Human nature says if this guy's willing to stand up, or this entity is willing to stand up and they're willing to attack back, maybe attacking the action, not the person. That's why you need to hire a crisis pro. But if you're willing to do that, then you're worth listening to. You're probably not guilty. But if you go on the defense or you don't communicate at all, you look very guilty.
Wow, some heavy human nature and behind that one for sure. But excellent advice. Okay, Karla Jo, as we come toward the end of the podcast here, we ask...
We're having too much fun.
I know. I've been told to keep it short. Speaking of the algorithm, right?
Yes.
I don't want to stress the view time too much on this. So we have 2 questions at the end here that we ask every guest. And the first is, looking forward to the future. So we're recording this in February of 2025. In 5 years' time, what major change is coming for the PR or the B2B world that we don't see coming right now?
I believe right now it's a PR world. I believe our society, our businesses, especially B2B, is waking up to the fact that there is a playbook and they can know it and they can do something about their own narrative. The public is not this fickle machine that just happens. PR and the news and the media, it's a manufactured industry. And companies, and I believe the good guys, I'm seeing a lot of this, we'll be able to see, like, I have my playbook, I know what to do, and they're going to be controlling the narrative way more than we're being manipulated. And I'm seeing signs of this, and that is what I predict in the next 5 years. It'll be a completely different playing field.
Okay. All right. And the final question we have is, if you could go back 5, 10 years, think to a pivotal moment in your career, what career advice would you give your younger self?
Ask for help. I think we have in our culture this rugged individualism that we're going to do it and make it and put our stamp on the world. I would ask for help. Absolutely. Ask for more help. It doesn't make you weak.
I think that's fantastic advice we could all hear at all levels and all industries. Asking for help is not necessarily a sign of weakness. It's a sign that we know our own limitations, and that can be a strength for sure. Right. All right. Well, this has been a lot of fun. If people want to learn more about you, where should they go?
They can find me on LinkedIn, Karla Jo Helms, Karlajo, very Southern name, Helms. You can go to our website, jotopr.com, and those are probably the best places to find me.
All right. Fantastic. Well, thanks so much again for coming on the show.
Yeah, it was a pleasure. Thanks, Cory.
You've been listening to the B2B Revenue Executive Experience. To ensure that you never miss an episode, subscribe to the show in iTunes or your favorite podcast player. Thank you so much for listening. Until next time.